We don't want the enemy to collide with the ship, our own ship. We want it to come within range and then fire a missile and then veer out of the way, just like standard bombing raids. So we're going to change the behavior of the enemy craft here. So if we go back into the enemy control script and edit it, so we need to add another float here, so I'll put a comma, and this is the range. I'll give it a default value. Now this means that if the enemy comes within 20 units of the ship, then it's in range. When it's in range, we want it to shoot a target and start veering out of the way. So I'm going to create another Boolean here. I'm going to call that armed. And I'm going to set its initial value to true. Now we're going to put another clause in here, so we're going to create a new vector 3. I'm going to call that proximity. And what I'm going to do is look at the difference between the target transform and the transform of the enemy ship. So I'm going to say target dot transform dot position minus transform dot position, which is spelling. So that's the difference between the target transform position and the enemy transform position. Now, so we're going to check if we're in range. So if we look at proximity dot magnitude, so that strips out the direction, just look at how big it is. So in other words, what's the distance between the enemy and the target. So if it's less than the range, which we set at 20, we're also going to look at if the ship is armed. To open. If that's the case, what we're going to do is veer away. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is set armed to false. So this will only be done once. I'm going to create a new vector 3 now. I'm going to call this new direction, because we want the ship to change direction now. And I want it to rotate around the x-axis. So I'm going to create this based on vector 3 dot right. So remember that this is the x-axis, vector 3 right, and I'm going to multiply that by minus 20f. Right, so remember that vector 3 right is shorthand for 1, 0, 0, 0. So if I multiply that by minus 20, then I'll end up with minus 20, 0, 0. and I'm just going to rotate the ship by that amount. So I'm going to change the transform dot rotate. New dim. Oh right, yes, I want to do a bit of changing here as well. So I'm only going to change to look at the ship if it's armed. So I'm just going to put a little clause in here. Right, so it'll only change to look at the ship if it's armed. If it's not armed, then we're going to just ignore this. So in here we're going to add shooting a bolt in the meantime. Let's just check that again. Lovely. Now I'll go back to here. And we should bring in the new variable. There we go. So the range is 20. So now, if I play the game, what I hope will happen is the ship will approach, but not collide with our ship, but veer off. Let's see. Okay, so it's approaching, and hopefully within range, it's going to suddenly change direction. And look at that, it did. Excellent. Okay, before it changes direction, we want to shoot a missile. So let's create the missile. Right. So to do that, let me look at the top. What we're going to do is to create a place where the missile is going to be generated. So I'm going to add a child to the enemy. I'm going to call this spawn point. And I'm going to move the spawn point just in front of the ship. So look from the side. Yeah, that looks good. Looks good. Right, this is the place I'm going to actually create the missile. Right, well, let's create a missile. So I'm going to create an empty object. I'm going to call this missile. And I'm going to add a 3D object to that. It's going to be a capsule. Let's move that. I'm going to make the capsule a child of missile. So I'm going to set this at 0. So now I can move the missile out, and it's at that point. Let's just change the view. Okay, it's a bit of a fat missile and pointing in the wrong direction. So I'm going to rescale it. So 0.2 there. And I'm going to scale it on this axis as well. Right, that's a better shape. And I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. Okay, that looks more like the sort of bolts that we want to generate. Now I want to create a new material for this bolt, so I've selected the materials folder and I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this bolt glue. Right, and I'm going to apply it to the capsule. Okay, So I'm going to make this an emission and choose a color for the emission. So it's sort of red. Oops. Veer more towards the orange than the pink. The base color, make that red. Okay, so it's a mission and it will cast a light in front of it. Let's increase that glow a bit. Okay. So now the missile is pointing forward here. So let's change that. Okay, so now the actual spawn point is in the middle of the capsule, which is good. Now this missile has one job to do, and that's to travel forward at considerable speed. So I'm going to add a script to the missile, and I'm going to call it missile control. Okay, let's edit the script. Right, I'm going to put a public float in here, which is the missile speed. I'm going to make that, say, 20. Right, so the only job this has to do is to move forward. So I'm going to put in here transform, translate. In the forward direction times m speed, and I'm going to scale that down by time, not delta time, otherwise it would go much too fast. Right, check. That's fine. Well, it couldn't be simpler really, could it? Right, so if you just check particular missile now, when I test the game, let's take off maximize on play, because it's going to go in the wrong direction anyway. It should head off to the left in this view. Okay, off it goes. Right, so in order to generate this, I need to turn it into a prefab. So I'm going to drag it into the prefabs folder and remove it from here. Let's go back and have a look at that enemy code. Now I want a couple more references here. So we've got public missile. So that's the game object we're going to generate, and I need a reference to the spawn point, but I'm not interested in anything but its transform, so I'm going to bring it in as a transform. Right, so before we change direction, we're going to create a new missile. So we've got game object, right, so we're going to instantiate a missile, and we're going to instantiate it at the spawn point. So at the spawn point position and with the same direction as the spawn point. So it's its rotation. Now this missile might hit something, it might miss something, so I don't want it to last forever. So at the point where I create it, I'm also going to destroy it. But not just yet. I'm going to give it a delay of, say, 2 seconds. So if it doesn't hit anything within 2 seconds, it's going to just destroy itself. Let's check again. Yes. So at this point, the ship should come towards us. Put maximum in range, which is 20 units. It should destroy it. It should generate a missile. So we just need to put in some. So we've got the spawn point. So I'll just drag that in there. And we'll drag a missile from the prefabs folder now. Let's see. Right, so there it shot its missile, it went straight through the ship, and the enemy veered off. The missile isn't doing any damage at the moment, but that'll be the next thing to think about and how we can protect ourselves.